Hello YouTube, how are you? Hope everybody's doing fine, I really do. We'll get into the video in just a minute, but please make sure to hit the subscribe button. Also hit the notification bell. Make sure that you get the information when I put out a new video. Go over to my Twitch channel. Also go to tattooed1009.com, which you see flashing up here at the top, to get information that I can't put on YouTube and other stuff that I have recorded so you can see it in the present time that you might not have got to see before. So much love to y'all. Y'all have a great day, and please enjoy the information that I'm bringing to you today. Have a good day now, you hear?
Joining me now is syndicated radio talk show host Larry Elder, who also joined YouTube in the last year, and he's not doing too bad for a boomer. Almost 300,000 subscribers on the Larry Elder with the Epic Times YouTube channel, where he tackles the political and racial issues of the day. But according to Joe Biden, he ain't black, which is interesting because he has a brand new documentary out today. I'll leave a link to it down in the description below. About being a black conservative today. Features a lot of familiar faces, from Candace Owens and Jesse Lee Peterson to Brandon Tatum. And I'm a little hesitant to even say the title, Larry, because today's double standards about what a white person can and cannot say. So I'll just leave that to you.
Well, thank you for giving me that privilege. It's called Uncle Tom, and you can see the trailers on UncleTom.com, and also subscribe, order the movie on UncleTom.com.
I don't remember the actual day, but I remember the emotion that I felt when it happened.
I'm often asked, was there an epiphany?
I started asking questions.
As I became more politically aware,
a lot of the way that I saw things began to change.
All of this information I've been taking in for several years.
A continuation of these kind of contradictions.
I had bought into all of these lies.
You begin to see what the real agenda is.
That's usually how that red pilling process begins.
Black America is starting to get it.
People are starting to realize what's going on.
And the reason I did it is because a young filmmaker approached me named Justin Malone, and he interviewed me about a documentary he was doing about how black conservatives get a lot of grief for saying, in his opinion, very commonsensical kinds of things like maybe, just maybe, the party that allows inner city parents choice so that they don't have to send their kid to an underperforming inner city school, maybe that's the party that that I ought to vote for. The Republican Party is a party of pro-choice. The Democratic Party is wedded to the teachers union, and they adamantly hate the idea of private school vouchers. So what happens if a person like myself, like Candace Owens, like many other conservatives, support private school vouchers? One would hope it would launch a discussion about whether or not we ought to be spending K through 12 the same kind of money on education for public schools, getting very poor results. Whether or not we ought to reconsider that. Instead, we're called Uncle Toms and self-loathers and coons and any number of words that just shut down conversation. And my documentary is not an angry documentary. It's not a documentary that says, how dare you mistreat people like Herman Cain and Ben Carson and Allen West so badly. It's, why can't we have an intelligent discussion in the black community about things like Roe versus Wade? Why can't we have an intelligent discussion in the black community about whether or not porous borders help or hurt? There's a Harvard economist named George Borjas, probably done more work, Mark, than anybody I know on the impact of legal and illegal immigration. He says there's no question that unskilled illegal aliens compete for jobs that would otherwise be held by unskilled black and brown people, and puts downward pressure on their wages. One of my buddies, Peter Kurzanow, who's a member of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, says that illegal aliens cost the average unskilled black worker around $1,800 a year in terms of downward pressure on his wages. So you say these kinds of things, and rather than say maybe we ought to rethink our relationship with the Democratic Party, or maybe we ought to rethink my attitude about legal immigration, I'm the bad guy. I'm an Uncle Tom. I'm a sellout. And Mark, when you look at what's going on right now in the streets today, we have these protests over the shooting of George Floyd, over the shooting of Rayshard Brooks in Atlanta. And you have Black Lives Matter and all these organizations on the streets making the argument that the police are engaging in a systemic pattern of brutality against black people. Not only is it not true, studies have suggested, if anything, Mark, it's the opposite. Police are more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black person than on a white person. And, you know, many left-wing people have silly ideas. Silly ideas don't hurt unless they have a real consequence. This has a real consequence on two ends. It's encouraging young black men, when they're pulled over and stopped by the police, to be confrontational, because after all, if you think they're going to brutalize you, why not be confrontational? It also causes the police to pull back for fear they're going to be called racist. It's called the Ferguson Effect. And you saw that outside of Ferguson in St. Louis. You saw it in Chicago when there was a high-profile killing. You saw it in Baltimore after Freddie Gray died in police custody. The police say, "The hell with this. If the community does not want to be need to be proactive and look proactively to stop crime, I won't. I'll respond to 911 calls." And what happens is bad guys know that, and crime goes up. So to say something like what I just now said, does that launch a healthy debate in the black community about whether or not we ought to change our attitude about the police? No. I'm calling Uncle Tom, I'm called a sellout, and conversation is shut down. All my documentary asks is, can we not have an intelligent discussion? Do I not have permission as an American, as a black American, to think for myself without being deemed being a sellout? That's all the movie asks.
And of course, there's no CNN town hall about it, you know, no national discussion. The media, you know, you've been in the industry for, what, 40 years perhaps, in the radio and television industry, and a syndicated columnist. I mean, has the media ever been this bad? I mean, you're almost, I would never guess, you're almost 70 years old. So you've lived through, you know, a tremendous change in this country. Obviously, we have some difficult issues that we've tackled fairly well, still some residual racism floating around. But are we going backwards because the media is fanning the flames through the fake news, and with Twitter having viral fake news stories inflaming the masses?
Well, I've been complaining about the liberal bias for my entire radio and television career, which spans, as you know, almost 40 years. I've never seen the bias this bad. And forget about Larry Elder. When you have Van Gordon Saunter, who's a former head of CBS News for decades, recently writing an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal, and he said, "I've never seen news coverage this bad, this biased, even my own place, this bad, this biased. There is no return to this." He said the only salvation is for people in the media to fess up, man up, and say, yes, I'm left-wing, I'm biased, and it is through that filter that you will be reading my news. That's the only salvation. Again, this is a former head of CBS News admitting this. And I've never seen a situation where somebody like Drew Brees, as respected as he is, makes the most innocuous statement, and he said something to the effect of, I will never agree with anybody who disrespects the flag. That's all he said. He didn't say, I'm not going to play with anybody who kneels. I want anybody who kneels off my team. I want the commissioner to make a new rule. All he says is, I'll never agree with that. And he apologizes, and his wife apologizes. The NFL apologizes. A former editor of the New York Times resigned because he dared to approve an op-ed piece written by Tom Cotton, a piece that was not hysterical, not over the top. All it said was, if you continue with these riots in the streets, we're going to have to call in the National Guard, a position that was supported by most of the American people. So this guy approves an op-ed piece. By the way, op-ed means opposite of the editorial, I kind of thought. Isn't that by definition what you're supposed to do, put opposing points of view on there? Don't you want to know how somebody like Tom Cotton, who's an important member of the Republican Party, is thinking about this issue? So he approves this op-ed piece. 800 staffers rebel, claiming that they violated some sort of journalistic principle by putting in the op-ed piece, and this guy resigns. Philadelphia Inquirer, same thing. The editorial guy of the editorial page approves a newspaper headline, a story headline rather, about a story about burning buildings, and the story was all buildings matter. And he has to resign because there was a rebellion on the part of reporters who thought the headline was insensitive. This guy's been there for 20 years. He resigns. This intolerance. I mean, we've always been dominated by what I call the axis of indoctrination. That's Hollywood, academia, and media. But I've never seen it this dominating. And
isn't the reason for it? The reason for it because President Trump had a lot of support of the black community for decades when he was a businessman. He was a symbol of success. Rappers were name dropping him in their songs. He did cameos in a bunch of television shows. he could have been the guy, and in a fair world, would have been the guy that majority of the black community or half the black community would have got behind and said, that's our guy. He's doing great. All the facts show it. But because he has helped them so much, because he's making progress, he's siphoning the votes from the Democrat Party, they have to paint him and paint the Republicans and fan the flames with these half-truths and these isolated instances that are tragedies that then are turned into a global issue, correct?
Yeah, well, they've done that all the time. That's the Democrat playbook. They called Ronald Reagan a fascist. They called George W. Bush a fascist. They called Maxine Waters, even called George Herbert Walker Bush, the so-called good Bush, a racist. They've always done that. But again, I've never seen this level of venom. And I think part of it is, you touched on it, the media helped to create Donald Trump. When he first declared, they thought he was a joke. And they loved putting him on because the ratings went up, and they kept putting him on, He got hundreds of millions of dollars in free publicity just because they put him on. And then when they left, they made a bunch of jokes, and little by little he began picking off all of his Republican candidates. And then they realized, holy bleep, we created a monster who then turned on them and referred to them as fake news. And they are livid that they helped create him, and they're livid that he has outed them as fake news. And the level of credibility and trust in the media on the part of the American people probably is at an all-time low, and they know it, and they know that Donald Trump has had a lot to do with that. So they're very, very angry.
And that's why I think we're seeing these organic voices popping up through social media, like Candace Owens, Brandon Tatum, who I consider a friend. I met him at the White House Social Media Summit last year. Jesse Lee Peterson. Candace started as just as a YouTuber, and now is being name checked by Dave Chappelle in his latest comedy special. She is a star. Kanye West helped to amplify her. And those sort of voices, and for every one of them, there's got to be dozens of smaller people just getting started with perhaps a few thousand followers that maybe I'm not familiar with, but have a solid following. And I think that's a symptom of this suppression, and these people organically are getting their voices out there, and just adds then to the repercussions trying to stamp them out. And people like you, thankfully, have been doing this for 40 years. So tell us about the movie. Who all is in the movie? I mentioned a couple of the people, but there's a whole bunch of very familiar faces in this film.
Well, that's right. Candace Owens is in the film, and as you pointed out, she is a force of nature. She's amazing. A rapper named King Face is in the film. A longtime activist on the East Coast named Bob Woodson is in the film. Herman Cain is in it. Alan West is in it. But the film, really, the heart and soul of the film really is a young contractor in Texas whose name most people don't know. And he's just a young, hardworking black man who one day was challenged by one of his buddies, who is also a hardworking, independent guy. His buddy's a Republican, and he said to this guy who made some disparaging remarks about Republican Party, "Have you ever read the Republican Party platform, Democratic Party platform?" He says, "No." He says, "I suggest you read it and you tell me what you are." So the young black man took him up on the challenge and did. And after he read both platforms, he said, "Holy bleep, I'm a Republican." And then the movie is about the grief that he got from friends and family and others when he outed himself as somebody who believed in limited government, low taxes, and low regulation. And rather than, maybe we ought to rethink our assumption or tell me why you feel that way, it's all the crap that he got. And again, like most of us, we're called all sorts of things. The thing that I'm most worried about being called, Mark, is the dreaded W word, and that's wrong. I'm called Uncle Tom. I'm called Sambo Tom, foot dragging Sambo Tom, coconut Oreo, but rarely am I called the dreaded W word, and that's wrong.
And you have basically captured that word, sort of like some people in the black community did with the N word, and have sort of adopted it as a badge of honor in a sense, because at your website, again, which you'll just have to plug it because I don't know if I could say this word in today's day and age, you have merch. Right?
I do have Uncle Tom merch. Be the first in your neighborhood, by the way, Mark. When you do your man in the streets, I want to see you popping one of those puppies.
It's getting pretty dangerous out there. I'm going to have to, I got to be pretty careful these days, as you know. You mention the wrong word and offend the wrong people. But it's like shooting fish in a barrel out there now, because when I started doing those years ago, everybody supported Obama so blindly that they would sign petitions and agree to anything that I said that was his position. But now it's gotten so far down the road that some stuff that I did years ago is becoming talked about as policy, like reparations for gay people and all this. I mean, it's like you can't make it up. You can't tell what's satire and what's actually a position of the Democrat Party these days.
You have no shortage of material, Mark. I bet you if you go out in the streets and you ask the average person whether or not police shootings of unarmed blacks are higher than police shootings of unarmed whites, and they'll tell you yes. The Washington Post last year, there were 9 blacks who were shot and killed by the police. There were 19 unarmed whites who were shot and killed by the police. There were 15 unarmed blacks killed by the police altogether. That's still lower than the number of whites unarmed, 19 that were shot and killed by the police. Most people assume the other way around. I bet you most people have no idea that according to the CDC over the last 50, 60 years, the rate at which blacks have been shot by the police has declined 75%. While the rate at which police shoot whites has flatlined. And when you consider the fact that a young black man is 8 times more likely to be a victim of a homicide compared to a young white man, one would have thought, frankly, the number of blacks who were shot by the cops based upon the crime rate would be even higher. So if anybody has anything to complain about, it's probably white guys. Black people are 2.5 times more likely to be shot and killed by the police, but they're way more likely to commit murder. So again, based on the numbers, one would have thought that the number would have been even higher. So it's a lie, and all these people are out there rioting, protesting over a lie. One more quick comment. You take a look at Freddie Gray in 2015. That's in Baltimore. My goodness, Baltimore has a black mayor. The state attorney that brought the charges against the 6 officers was black. 3 of the 6 officers, black. The lawyer, the judge before whom 2 of the cases were tried, black. By the way, he found both officers not guilty. The head of the police department at the time was black. The number 2 guy, black. The U.S. attorney at the time, Loretta Lynch, black. The president of the United States, black. And so you have all these black people, and then you're talking about institutional racism. And I'm reminded of what comedian Wanda Sykes said after Obama got elected. She said, "How are you going to complain about the man when you are the man?" Well, many of these cities are being run by Democrats who are the ones that pick the police chiefs who are then accused of being racist. Scotty, beam me up.
It's a difficult conversation to have, especially for us white folks, because we obviously are going to be accused of being racist if you start mentioning certain statistics. And actually the ADL, I don't know if you're familiar with this, actually has a certain numeric hate symbol that they've designated when people talk about the 13% of the population and then the crime rate in black communities. So it's a very difficult conversation to have. So it's great to have, people in that community kind of, calling each other out. And others have, like Chris Rock. Have you seen that bit he did maybe back in the 90s about there's black people, and then he said then there's the other type? He will not do that bit anymore. He's apologized for it. He did a bit called "How to Not Get Your Bleep Kicked by the Police," but now so many of them are even afraid to speak out. Are there any rumblings of another Kanye West, who's any big kind of celebrities who in the black community who are ready to come and denounce the fake news for what it is and support the president and try to risk their career, I guess, for speaking the truth?
I haven't seen any signs of it. And even Kanye West would often pull back after he says something. Look, it's a very dicey thing for somebody to do in Hollywood right now. I'm in Hollywood as you and I speak. Is there a young A-lister, I mean somebody in his or her 20s or 30s who's a blatant pro-Trump supporter? I can't think of a single one. I can think of a whole bunch of people that hate his guts and have publicly said that. So it's a town where you are punished if you feel that way. And these people control what 80% of our movies. Our TV shows are produced by a handful of people who absolutely despise the left and embrace whatever cockamamie idea they want to embrace, whether it's affirmative action, whether it's reparations, whether it's Green New Deal, you name it, Hollywood will embrace it.
And a lot of blacks, I don't need to tell you, but are socially conservative. There was a viral video the other day of a woman schooling a white liberal, which needs to be done. The white liberals think they know better than the actual, black people themselves, about the stances about the LGBT issues and, the church community. I mean, I've been to a black church. People are familiar with it. It's a fantastic place. They are, when you look at the social issues, that's not a democratic platform that they're supporting. Right.
You're right. If you look at things like abortion, depending upon how the poll is worded, black people are more pro-life than non-black Democrats. Black people are probably more traditional marriage than white Democrats. And you'll find in the inner cities, I think I said earlier, black and brown parents want a choice. They don't want to send their kid to an underperforming government school if they have an option. It's a Democrat Party that does not want to do that. So when you look at things like choice, like abortion, like things like illegal immigration, it seems to me Republicans have some low-hanging fruit there. And the reason they don't do it is because they assume that 95% monolithic black vote cannot be broken. But I think Donald Trump has proven that it can be. If you look at polls, even those that are the most skeptical have Donald Trump getting at least 50% more of the black vote than he got in 2016. I've seen one poll that shows him getting as high as 40%. That was a Rasmussen poll. I think it's an outlier, but I do think that no matter how you slice it, Donald Trump's going to get a lot more of the black vote than he did in 2016 because of the results. People saw the economy. Lowest unemployment rate in the history of this country for blacks. People saw him pardoning the first black heavyweight champion, Jack Johnson. Both Obama and Republican presidents were asked to do this. This has been a 15-year campaign on the part of people like Ken Burns and Sylvester Stallone, and Trump did it. Trump is doing something about illegal immigration, as I mentioned before. We're not having the same kind of caravans we had before. And one Harvard economist says that illegal immigration takes jobs away and puts downward pressure on wages for black people, as I said earlier. Donald Trump also expanded money for historically black colleges, expanded money for so-called enterprise zones. So you add up all the things he's done, it seems to me that if you don't think of yourself as a victim, don't think of yourself as being persecuted, which is what the Democrats want you to think. That's why they blow up incidents like what happened in Minneapolis. They blow up things like what happened in Atlanta, and they want to give black people the impression that this is structural, this is systemic. They have to do that because if black people don't think of themselves as victims and vote the same way everybody else does, based on the economy, based on schools, based on crime, then the Democrat Party is going to be in very, very serious trouble, and they know it. That's why they want to stir the pot, tell black people that Donald Trump is a racist, Republican Party is a racist, the move for voter ID is racist, everything is racist, climate change is racist, you name it, spread a little racism on it, get black people angry, and they'll pull that lever 95% for us, and then we win.
Well, they are blaming climate change predominantly on the white people, as you probably have seen. We're causing the pollution that the black people are breathing in. You didn't exactly go to Beverly Hills High up there in Los Angeles. How were you able to kind of escape the, being sucked down that thug culture? And isn't that really one of the primary problems is, I don't know what percentage of the core of the black community, but there's a significant portion that has adopted this identity of the Snoop Dogs and all the as cool. And look, I love gangster movies, but I definitely don't want to be like that, but when they embrace that as an identity, and how were you able to escape that? And what advice do you have for others who may be, not exactly growing up in a nice neighborhood? How can they do that as well?
I never, Mark, felt like I was a victim. My brothers and I never felt that way, and largely because of our father. No one could have had a life tougher than my father. My father never knew his biological father, which shows you can grow up and be a responsible person even under the most dire of circumstances. He was kicked out of the house by his irresponsible mom when he was 13 years old, and he never returned. You're talking about a black boy, Jim Crow South, at the beginning of the Great Depression. My father ultimately became a Marine. He was one of the 20,000 first black Marines. They got a Congressional Gold Medal a few years ago, by the way. My dad had long since died. He was stationed on Guam, World War II. He was in charge of cooking. My dad can look at a cake and tell you what's in it. So he goes back to the South after the war to get him a job as a short order cook, and he's told, we don't hire. My father said, I cooked for the thousands of GIs during the war. Sorry, we don't hire. He went to an unemployment office. The lady told him he went through the wrong door. He goes to the hall. He sees colored only, goes through that door to the very same lady who sent him out. He went home to my mother, told her this story, said, this is BS. I'm going to LA, where he had been as a Pullman porter on the trains. Right before World War II, he became a Pullman porter. They were the largest private employer of blacks in those days. They came out to California. It was sunny, and people seemed to be more friendly. And my dad could walk into a restaurant, the front door, and get him a meal. So my dad made a mental note that maybe someday I'll relocate to California. Well, after he couldn't get a job as a cook in Chattanooga, he came out to California by himself, walked around for a couple of days, went to a bunch of restaurants, tried to get him a job as a cook, and he was told, I'm sorry, we only hire people with references. My dad said, references to be a short order cook? And they said yes. And so my dad ended up being a janitor, took 2 full-time jobs as a janitor, saved up his nickels and dimes, started a little cafe in an area of LA called Pico Union, ran that for almost 40 years, retired owning that property, the property next door, and his home. And my father always told my brothers and me the following, Mark: hard work wins. You can't control the outcome, but you're 100% in control of the effort. And before you complain about what somebody did to you, go to the nearest mirror, ask yourself, what could I have done to change the outcome? And finally, before you blame other people and do all that stuff, bad things are going to happen. How you respond to those bad things will tell your mother and me if we raised a man. If anybody had a right to be angry at the white man and be angry at the world, it is my father. He was not. Anytime I ever complained, my father always said, "Are you kidding? The sky is wide open for you. I wish I had your opportunities." And so my parents always told us to take advantage of our opportunities. This is a great country, and the country is very different from the country in which your mother and I were raised. And that's always how I felt. My dad was a lifelong Republican, my mom a lifelong Democrat, but a Kennedy Democrat. She believed in low taxes. She believed in low regulations. She did not believe that government should be providing health care for everybody. And in her later years, she began voting for George W. Bush. And I asked her, why did she change her party affiliation? And she gave me a bunch of silly answers, and it was emotional. She couldn't bring herself to move her to register as a Republican, but she couldn't blame herself to vote for Democrats anymore. She always said, I didn't become a Republican, the Democratic Party left me. But she never registered as a Republican. And I think it's how a lot of black people feel. They've been taught Republicans are bad guys. Never mind, Democrats have been the party of racism, the party of slavery, the party of Jim Crow. Somehow the Democrats are writing the history books and have whitened that part out, pardon the expression. And so a lot of people are unaware of the history. And so they have this emotional attachment to the Democratic Party, which frankly, based on the history of the party, is not warranted.
Well, hopefully it's time to break up with the Democrat Party, so I hope everyone will check out your documentary film. You'll have to plug it again, name the name. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but it's linked up in the description below. And, look at you now. Now you got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
I sure do. UncleTom.com, and don't forget, buy some Uncle Tom merch. Be the first in your neighborhood, and send me pictures. I'll post them on social media.
Great talking with you, Larry, and I look forward to catching up with you again in the future.
Anytime, Mark. Thank you.
A brand new study out of Australia by a team of scientists claims that the coronavirus is in fact human-made and did not occur naturally in nature, as we have been told so many times over the past few months.
COVID-19 virus was particularly well adapted to bind to human cells, and that was far superior to its ability to bind the cells of any other animal species.
And now another scientist has found that in fact the coronavirus is not of natural origin and contains protein sequences that appear that's about to be released in Australia. 5 scientists there who are actually working on a coronavirus vaccine said they found some very strange things while studying the pathogen. They claim that what they found leads them to believe that there is almost no way that COVID-19, the current coronavirus that the world is dealing with, actually originated in nature and as the result of evolution, as the WHO and people like Dr. Anthony Fauci continually claim. Instead, they say it's almost impossible that it's not human-made. The preliminary report of the study, which is now being peer-reviewed, is based on computer modeling of the virus's ability to infect various animals, including humans. It was published May 13th on the Cornell University website, which is used for discussion of pre-publication papers. Nikolai Petrovsky, the lead researcher, said his team suspects human manipulation in Wuhan because of the unmatched ability of the virus's protruding spike to infect human cells. The virus's binding strength for human cells far exceeds similar properties for infecting other animals, he said in a statement on the forthcoming report.
So the study findings were very interesting, which is that we found that the COVID-19 virus was particularly well adapted to bind to human cells, and that was far superior to its ability to bind the cells of any other animal species, which is quite unusual, because typically when a virus is well adapted to an animal and then it by chance crosses to a human, typically you would expect it to originally have lower binding to human cells than to the original host animal. We found the opposite, so that was a big surprise.
Now, on top of all of this, Dr. Petrovsky and his team also claim that there are other reasons that they say that someone tampered with this coronavirus and actually caused human manipulation of it. He says this, quote, "The fact that no corresponding virus has been found to exist in nature leads to the possibility that COVID-19 is a human-created virus. It is therefore entirely plausible that the virus was created in the biosecurity facility in Wuhan by selection on cells expressing human ACE2, a laboratory that was known to be cultivating exotic bat coronaviruses at the time." Then there is a new study led by Norwegian virologist Birger Sorensen, which has found that the coronavirus's spike protein contains sequences that appear to be artificially inserted. The researchers found that the virus had been doctored to bind to humans. They pointed out that it has hardly mutated since it began to infect humans, suggesting that it was already fully adapted to humans. Now, this report alone is pretty interesting, but what's really interesting to me is that several weeks ago I was sent an article that I've been looking into, and it's an article that wasn't written a couple of days ago or even in light of the coronavirus pandemic. Instead, it was actually written 5 years ago, and the title of it is "Lab-Made Coronavirus Triggers Debate." It was written November 16th, 2015. The article references Ralph Barrick, an infectious disease researcher at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, who published a study on his team's efforts to engineer a virus with a surface protein of the SHC-014 coronavirus found in horseshoe bats in China. Essentially, the article goes on to discuss the fact that the U.S. government was funding coronavirus bat research for some time, and then in October of 2013, the U.S. government put a stop to federal funding for gain-of-function studies, with particular concern rising about influenza, SARS, and MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. The NIH had funded such studies because they help define the fundamental nature of human pathogen interactions, enable the assessment of the pandemic potential of emerging infectious agents, and inform public health and preparedness efforts. In 2013, the federal government stopped funding these particular research projects. Then in 2014, the NIH began funding a separate group, which we've told you about, Echo Health Alliance, which in turn began sending those funds to several labs across China, including the lab in Wuhan, for the study of coronavirus in bats. All right, so what do we know? We know that the U.S. government was funding this research into coronavirus in bats, specifically altering coronaviruses. We know that in 2013 that funding stopped. We know that in 2014, under the Obama administration, the National Institutes of Health, under Dr. Anthony Fauci, began funding another group called Echo Health Alliance. That group then sent those funds to various labs across China, including the Wuhan Virology Lab. This is absolutely, without question, proven. About $3.4 to $3.7 million flowed to those various labs, including the Wuhan lab, for the study of coronavirus in bats. And it was only this year that the Trump administration, after attention was drawn to this funding, cut off that funding and made the National Institutes of Health cancel their funding of EcoHealth Alliance and the funding of those virology labs. The original article in Nature talked about a debate among scientists as to whether or not coronaviruses should be created in labs or even altered to make them more contagious for humans. In fact, it says this in the article: the debate comes down to how informative the results are. The only impact of this work is in the creation in a lab of a new non-natural risk. Richard E. Bright, a molecular biologist and biodefense expert at Rutgers University, told Nature. But then the article goes on to defend this practice, and it says, Barrick and others argue the study's importance. Quote, the results move this virus from a candidate emerging pathogen to a clear and present danger. Peter Daszak, president of the EcoHealth Alliance, which samples viruses from animals and people in emerging diseases, hotspots across the globe, told Nature. Have you heard that name before, EcoHealth Alliance? Because I have. Remember, in 2013, according to this article, the funding was stopped from the U.S. government to those studies of non-natural man-made coronaviruses. In 2014, EcoHealth Alliance, the same company defending the practice here, began to receive funding from the National Institutes of Health under Dr. Anthony Fauci. So EcoHealth Alliance takes that funding, which runs anywhere between $3.4 million and $3.7 million, and begins funding the study of coronaviruses in bats in a series of labs across China, including in the Wuhan lab. EcoHealth Alliance, the same company that in this article in 2015 insists that it is of value to create non-natural coronaviruses that can attach to humans. That's what the claim is in the article, and we know that EcoHealth Alliance began funding. Now, to be clear, we don't know that EcoHealth Alliance was funding the development of non-natural pathogens and non-natural coronaviruses at the Wuhan lab. We don't know the answer to that, but we should know the answer to that. That's where this is leading us, to find out whether or not that is in fact true. Is that in fact what was happening? Because what we don't have answers to, and this is key, is what were our tax dollars used for at those labs? The $3.4 to $3.7 million that the US government passed through EcoHealth Alliance, which then passed to those labs, including the Wuhan lab, what specifically was it used for? The documents need to be provided. Members of Congress need to demand to see them. We want to know what it was used for and how it was used. And was the study of non-natural pathogens, was the creation of a non-natural coronavirus part of that research? So the question, coming back to these Australian researchers, if their research actually gets out, really comes down to the big question of whether or not manipulation, human manipulation, took place in order to create a form of coronavirus that would intentionally attach more easily to human cells.
If it was to turn out that this virus came about because of an accidental lab release, that would have implications for how we do viral research all in laboratories all around the world, which could make doing research much harder. And so I think the inclination of virus researchers would be to presume that it came from an animal until proven otherwise, because that will have less ramifications for how we're able to do research in the future.
Now, having said all that, we don't have the answer. But that's what scientists should be doing right now, is looking for these answers. As a journalist, I can only try to connect dots, but I'm not the scientist. The problem that we're going to run into, even with this report, if you watch it and you share it, is that you're going to hear from so many people on social media and social media companies that say this is misinformation. It's not. It's not misinformation. It is taking a look at what researchers are finding and then following that to its conclusion, whatever it might be. The reality is we might find that these Australian researchers are wrong. We also might find out that these Australian researchers are right. But for those who are in authority in health positions in this country to merely dismiss this as being untrue and misinformation does nothing to really take a look at the reality of what's happening here. It's also important to note this, that if what these scientists are saying is true, it raises an entire other series of questions about what's being researched, what kind of research is being done, how it affects all of our lives, and whether or not there should be accountability in that medical space. Because remember, the National Institutes of Health uses our tax dollars to conduct its research, uses our tax dollars to carry out all the things that they're carrying out right now. So there needs to be accountability for what they've done in the past, what they're doing now, and for what they will do in the future. We'll continue to follow the story, follow it wherever it takes us, because that's what journalists do. We know you'll continue to follow as well. Share this report if you would on social media, and we'll see you again very soon.
Hi everyone, Lisa Haven here, and I've got a question for you. Have you had enough yet? Enough of these political, brainwashing, propagandized mind games that our politicians and the mainstream media have been playing with the American people? Are you sick and tired of being told everything you can and can't do? Sick and tired of being tracked, having your social media, your cell phones, your home phones, everything literally monitored and tracked? I don't know about you, but I am sick and tired of it. As of 2020, we literally lost each and every single one of our freedoms. We were told to stay locked up in our homes under literal house arrest, having not any of us committed any kind of crime whatsoever. And this went on for months. To many of us here in the United States of America, if that wasn't enough, then they started to use propaganda to incite a race war between the American people to try to get us disgruntled and fighting with one another for something that has been way blown out of the water. And now many of our statues and precious historical sites are literally destroyed and obliterated. I believe over 10 to 20 over the past couple of weeks have now been completely obliterated. In the name of what? A propaganda war by the globalist elite? Well, you know what? Have you had enough yet? You see, because the globalists don't think you have. They want to break the spirit and the minds of the American people, and this is exactly what they're doing. And so now, to add a little wood to the fire, right? Now they're mandating what you can and can't wear on your body. In many states all across the U.S., they are telling us that we have to put on masks of suppression. You know, note to self, if you've got gaps in the mask, right, and you're taking the mask off and then putting those germs back in your mouth and breathing in your own germs from those masks, it's not going to do very much unless you really got an N95 mask or higher or better. Right? Because you're just breathing in your own germs after having touched it, touched everything, touched your mask and put those back in your mouth. And you're going to tell us, globalists, elitists, and the useful idiots, if you will, that are going along with the agenda unknowingly. And there's also useful, smart people, right? Going along with the agenda because they just don't know. But yet, people like me and many others have fought for freedom, freedom of choice, freedom. And the libertarian in me says, you don't force me to wear something I don't want to wear, and I won't force you to do something you don't want to do. But for some reason, in the name of saving lives, because everything they're going to sell to you comes in the name of good. You know, Hitler, right? With the Jews, we need to send the Jews to a concentration camp to save lives. Stalin, we need to control the food supply and do something about the food supply for the people to save lives. We need to abolish the police department, for crying out loud. What the? To save lives. I mean, really? Are they smoking something? I mean, get rid of the police department? Who are you gonna call, right? When somebody comes knocking at your door. This is insane land. Insane. Have you had enough yet? I've had enough. And you want a little more fuel to the fire? How about this? Check this article out here because this is absolutely critical. This is on ifaprayer.org. Satanic marches are planned in the United States cities this weekend, and that was published June 20th. And the marches, I believe, are for June 21st in over 22 cities. 22 cities across the U.S. are going to have Satanist marches now? Hey, but don't worry. The mainstream media says there's a massive amount of infections happening from COVID. We need to stay home, lock down again, and wear masks and get protected. But hey, Satanists are going out to march. They're not going to say one word about that. And hey, it was okay for all these protests in the name of George Floyd. The mainstream media came out and said a million are gathered for the funeral, or hundreds of thousands, or whatever the number was, right? Gathered for the funerals for George Floyd. This is a good thing. COVID-19 was missing in action somehow. But yet if we had a patriot rally, right, and protested the lockdowns, they're murderous people. Wait now. Is America awake yet to the hypocrisy of that statement alone? Why are we suddenly complying to everything they tell us to do when the pure hypocrisy showed that it was okay to protest and do the George Floyd funeral, but it wasn't okay if you had a Jewish funeral, or if you, in the case of New York, right, something you could look at, or if you had a Trump rally like this. Take a look. This is on the Federalist.com. Media raises hysteria over Trump Tulsa rally after celebrating mass protests. So something doesn't add up to me here, right? Why is it okay to protest George Floyd and not worry about safety protocols and COVID-19? And literally, we had a bunch of nurses send a letter saying that it was more safe to go to that protest because all these nurses wrote a letter and said it was okay. But hey, now it's suddenly not okay to have a Trump rally and COVID is going to spread there. This is not science. Science would say it spreads in Tulsa, it spreads at George Floyd, it spreads at all protests. But hey, look, I protest. I'm all for rallies and getting out there. We should have a right to do that. But you shouldn't treat one hypocritically and say this one doesn't really have any impact, but this one does, and this one can spread COVID, but this one can't really, or we're just not going to talk about that. Wait now. Wait now. Everybody in America should see through that hypocrisy and break out of the manipulated mind control that we're in. I'm so sick. It gets really hard sometimes to get out there and try to convince a mind-controlled person, right? Because when you argue with somebody, right, and they've believed something for so long, the brain has an automatic defense mechanism, right? So you tell somebody something they haven't heard before, the automatic force of that person is to fight it, because you got to be right. That's human nature. That's what we're standing with here, and that's why it's so important to get message out, to get information out, to spread the word. I'm pouring my heart out in today's report because I'm so tired of being told what I can and can't do. Is this not America? This isn't America. We're talking about 99.8 survival rate, according to the CDC, YouTube. That's on the CDC website. When you consider what they believe to be 35% extra spread of asymptomatic cases, which, by the way, the World Health Organization said they are rarely contagious asymptomatic cases. Hey, and then they went and retracted it and said the very next day, within 24 hours, and said, well, we still have a lot to learn. That's not retracting, right? We still have a lot to learn about everything under the sun. We don't know everything. No kidding. Have you had enough yet? What's enough? What's enough? Meanwhile, we have suicide rates out the freaking rear end. We have people losing their jobs, losing their health care. For what? Anyhow, I'm just ecstatic at the state of my country. The America that I know and love is missing in action right now. Do what we say. We're literally living in a country that can mandate what you wear on your body. Why not just go full hazmat suits? Why not just put facial covering? Here's you could tell me or anyone else. I'm not saying this, whatever. I'm saying it's about choice. It should be choice. I believe in choice. That libertarian side, right? But the thing is, right? If you're going to tell me how to live my body and tell me that I have to do something like wear a mask, then don't get mad at me when I start pillaging through your cart in the grocery store and saying, hey, you shouldn't eat those Doritos. You shouldn't have that ice cream. I'll keep it for myself. But it's not good for you, right? Because that's what they're doing to us. We're taking care of you and other people by putting a mask on your body. Well, I'm going to take care of you and other people by removing the stuff in your cart that you shouldn't be eating, because cancer is an even bigger killer than COVID. It's killed over 3.9 million people this year. 3.9. Compare that to 400 and some odd thousand by COVID. I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface here. If we're going to wear masks and mandate something, how about we mandate something like get rid of GMOs, you know? Hey, no more GMOs. That's going to help everybody. Or at least label the darn thing, right? That's how we would save lives. But under that kind of world, we would have everything mandated. Our food, our sleep time, our how and when we drive, you know? And that's what they're headed for. Because in the name of safety, they can control everything on you. What you wear on your body, AKA masks. Why not put us in a hazmat suit? It saves lives. Why not make us all stop driving? It saves lives. Why not control what we eat and what we do? It saves lives. Those agendas are bound for the future. And the second driverless cars comes on the front and starts being a mainstream thing, I can guarantee you, they're going to push that agenda in the name of saving lives. Same thing with the green agenda, in the name of saving lives. Same thing with Agenda 21. We're going to save lives. They never sell you something they sell you dangerous things in a beautiful package. And America has just gone. Anyhow, I love all of you. I kind of went on a rant and I couldn't help it because I've been reading freaking crazy tweets all day. You know when you get those tweets and those Facebook posts and you read them and you're like, you just want to shake the person because you're like, what the hell is wrong with you? You don't get it. I've been dealing with that for the past week. Excuse-moi. So sometimes, yeah, I just like to get on here and have a chat with you guys. Anyhow, I want to encourage you guys, please don't forget to check out my partner. You guys know I'm a big advocate for having food on hand. Preparewithlisa.com. Here, I'll show you some of the food products here that they have. That's Patriot Supply, but this is the long grain rice, 30-year shelf life. And right now, you know, is one of the best moves I ever did because I have it at my home in the event that I need it. And with this chaos, I just don't trust anything anymore. Kind of have to reevaluate a lot of things in our lives during a time period like this. So check it out at preparewithlisa.com. Anyhow, I love all of you. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Lisa Haven.
Hello, YouTube. How are you? Hope everybody's doing fine. I really do. We'll get into the video in just a minute. But please make sure to hit the subscribe button. Also hit the notification bell. Make sure that you get the information when I put out a new video. Go over to my Twitch channel. Also go to tattooed1009.com, which you see flashing up here at the top, to get information that I can't put on YouTube and other stuff that I have recorded so you can see it in the present time that you might not have got to see before. So much love to y'all. Y'all have a great day. And please enjoy the information that I'm bringing to you today. Have a good day now, you hear?